And welcome back to the program. And if you're just joining us, you're listening to the Natural House Call with Dr. Z, Dr. Eugene Zampro, naturopathic physician and herbalist, retired professor of naturopathic medicine, and your host for this wonderful program with Carol Peterson. She is a registered pharmacist and has many accolades in bioidentical hormone and hormone research and hormone balancing. And we're doing a deep dive because it is Valentine's Day, but that's kind of prompted me to do the program with Carol. But it's great to see her again for the new year and talk about how we can help people with these very medical mysteries. Sometimes they come to the doctor and they're complaining of so many different things, and they're attributed to hormonal imbalances. Take low progesterone for an example. Give us some of the
Okay, let
effects
me let
effects
me
and
give
complaints that people talk about when they have low progesterone.
well, let me just do a little bit broader thing because of Valentine's Day you brought up sexuality.
Hmm.
And I was delighted to meet by telephone this 80-year-old woman whose daughter was a physician who used bioidentical hormones. So she helped out her 80-year-old mother. And her 80-year-old mother met and married a younger man, 65. And she was in the process of writing a book about sex in your 80s.
Wow.
And I want to reinforce, I speak to clients all the time, all ages. They're interested in their sexuality, and well, they should be, because this is a sign of good health. I say it's like a big red flag. When you're losing that, you know things are impeded.
Hmm.
Where I like to go, since you brought up low progesterone, is this is the first hormone to drop in perimenopausal stuff. It's responsible for hot flashes along with insulin glucose drops. It's not the estrogen. Um, Jerry Lynn Pryor published data showing that estrogen is highest in the perimenopausal years
Hmm.
in women over their whole lifetime. And yet, conventional medicine, I don't know if you see this, it's like estrogen, 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 including for the hot flashes, which are occurring before estrogen even dropped. I think some women do get some relief from estrogen because it's also a time of volatility of estrogen, which in turn can cause some insulin glucose swings too. But it's not the fundamental. Low progesterone is at play. And so you start seeing all these anxiety things. Progesterone will balance that adrenaline. You start having sleep issues. You can't go to sleep. Progesterone will help with that. You
Hmm.
wake up in the middle of the night. What's happening? Your glucose has dropped. Up comes the adrenaline. And you can't go back to sleep because your mind's busy. You can eat something, you can use progesterone. Progesterone's a balancer of that adrenaline. Um, anxiety. Anxiety from that adrenaline all the time. Um, one one of my clients said to me after using progesterone, I just love this. She said, nothing my husband says bothers me anymore.
Great.
I
Sign me
said,
up. Sign. Everyone's like, sign me up.
good. You're on a good dose of progesterone.
Wow.
And what really hit me when she said that, look at all the relationship problems you start having when both men and women start having hormone deficiencies. It makes you terribly moody and reactive. And you don't have to have that. We have, for the first time in human history, we can top off our hormones that are declining. And then what is aging? We can also characterize aging as hormone deficiencies because that
Hmm.
indeed presents as an aging body.
Hmm.
So let's move on to just and men and progesterone. I'm going to publish a blog pretty soon. I've been working on this, trying to find enough references on progesterone in men. And this is a problem because not too much research has been done on this.
Hmm.
Yet men can get better sleep with progesterone. Men can have their anxiety relieved with progesterone. They don't need a benzo. Men can even have their libido improved with progesterone. If you have prostate enlargement, this is like a high estrogen, high insulin state where progesterone will help you with that. Also, some implications there for prostate cancer. If you've
Hmm.
ever had a traumatic brain injury, more likely in men because they're rough and tumble, you've perhaps damaged your hypothalamus, your pituitary, and your head, which are the directors of your hormones. And looking at men's hormones and seeing what they're low, and maybe it's from the pituitary, you don't know for sure, but you could have some abnormally low testosterone in men as a result of falling off a bicycle when they were 10. So
Wow.
so you need to be looking into that. Then insult to injury, here we go. Now, because I'm old now, I have some history. And what I am seeing, if you have a serum test, probably the other test too, for testosterone, the normal range is truncated down. For instance, for women, used to be like 20 to 80 or 90 for total testosterone. Now I'm seeing a lot of labs are saying 2 to 45 or 50 normal range. This is not normal. So
Hmm.
you have somebody, let's say their total testosterone as a woman comes up at 17. If you're saying, oh, all the way up to 45, that doesn't look so bad as you're aging. But if you look at the whole range of a human female, and they should be 80 to 90, and now 17 doesn't look that good, does it?
Yeah, when you look at labs and the labs publish a range,
Yep.
you're saying that you should be it's like a bell curve. So you should be in the upper part of a bell curve, just like you would taking an exam and getting a B plus instead of
Yep.
a D minus.
Yeah, I
Okay.
love that, Dr. Z. So your score on your testosterone is actually a D or D minus, where you could be a B plus or even an A.
Yeah, that's how I talk to patients. I mentioned that. I said, it's like an exam. You don't want, just like you want your doctor to have done well on their board exam, you don't want doctors, even though they can theoretically pass with a D minus. We used to have A, B, or fail when I was a professor at University of Bridgeport.
Mhm.
So if you got less than a B, you failed. So we wouldn't turn out doctors that weren't very high. So why should we have hormones that are in the D minus range? Yet because the mainstream labs don't flag that as abnormal, doctors say, "Oh, that's okay. You're kind of in this low area of even the other hormones like pregnenolone and DHEA, which we should talk a little bit more about. They also have a big range. DHEA is like 20 to like 1200. And there's people that come in with a DHEA of 50, and then, they're younger, maybe the DHEA is high, and that's flagged as normal by the lab. It's not normal. So, yeah, I like your
Yeah,
point. I think that's
this is
very well
it.
taken.
This is another trick, and men's testosterone levels have also been truncated down, just as women's. So the normal range of it makes you look better, but you're not at optimal. It should be way out here and you should be up there. DHEA is also especially tricky on lab test reports because what they had been doing before, they would give you ranges for each decade of age. You're at your highest in your 20s. By the time you're 80, you're down to 20% of your DHEA production. And what will they do? So they have normal ranges for each decade of life. So you take your test, let's say you're 65, and they won't give you all these ranges. They'll give you the age appropriate range. So it's
Hmm.
now low because you're old. And so your low DHEA doesn't look as low as it would if you compared it to the 20, 30-year-old. But if you're really looking for successful aging, an immune system that has resilience, you want your DHEA to be in a good place. You want it to be restored to maybe a 20, 30-year
I was
level.
going to ask, what year should you go for? Like 40s,
Yeah,
30s,
30s, 30s.
Wow. That's 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 amazing. So that I
Yeah,
would have to relook even the way I interpret things with
yeah,
patients.
it's very tricky. Okay, now sexual interest. Let's say, of course, you have to have part of it's in your brain, and part of it is in your sexual organs. So if the machinery is not working, it's not likely you're going to enjoy having sexual encounters. So one of the things I really like is testosterone in a cream applied to the perineum with um, applied to the clitoris because it's atrophying. You don't have any sensation. How are you supposed to enjoy it? And the bladder tissue and the ureters all are heavily endowed with testosterone receptors. So you don't want to have any of this little urine leakage and ignore that. Testosterone fix that right away, and you're not on the death march to a nursing home. And
That's kind of funny, Carol, because in Chinese medicine, the herbs that have been pretty evidence-based to actually raise testosterone, and there's several of them. Not all herbs do. Some just raise your libido, but they don't raise testosterone, so it's mysterious how they work, but maybe on the brain and hypothalamus. But those ones, those very ones, are the ones that help with bladder leakage.
very
There's
interesting.
there's one called cuscuta, which is the seed of the dodder, which is this like parasitic plant. It's well revered in Chinese medicine as something that helps with leaky bladder, like you cough or you sneeze or you laugh and unfortunately
Yes.
have an accident. This happens sometimes as you become older or you have surgery or some injury to the area. And the treatment of that is to use, an herbal formula. It's more complex than just a dodder, but dodder is like the chief herb in Chinese medicine. When you make a formula, you have a chief herb and deputies. And so it's interesting that, and dodder is one of those things that raises testosterone. It's actually a plant that can do that. There are several of them well known that we use in naturopathic and botanical medicine. So
That's
that's makes
very
sense to me.
exciting. You're going to have to help me expand my repertoire to.
Yes, I'd be happy to share because actually at the conference that we met, I was last year I spoke maybe it was the year before. I spoke at and I talked about botanical ways and nutritional ways to raise testosterone in men. It was well received lecture at it was held in Vermont. So yeah, daughter is interesting, but back to your testosterone. Now, tell us the difference between the total testosterone, because many doctors will run the total, but they don't run the free or the bioavailable. And those are very important different markers that have to be all in line.
Okay, this is tied up with a carrier protein made by the liver called sex hormone binding globulin. And in reality, you'd really like it to be 60, 70, but you can see elevations. And I've seen some like 150. It's out of sight, out of the usual boundary of the test results. What makes sex hormone binding globulin increase? Now, sex hormone binding globulin carries estrogens and it carries testosterone, DHEA, dihydrotestosterone. But what happens is it'll preferentially bind to the testosterone and derivatives over the estrogen ones. So it has a profound effect. So that sex hormone binding globulin is instigated by high estrogens, instigated by high cortisol, which along with the adrenaline surges, you're getting that high cortisol. So it's useful to me to look at that because what I'm looking for is, are we having a real estrogen dominance kind of situation pushing this way up? And that makes theoretically, again, less testosterone available to the cells. And there's actually a mechanism where the body will take up testosterone bound to sex hormone binding globulin will take it into the cells, but it's got to have a carrier molecule to do that. So it doesn't mean that it's totally inactive. It's just not so efficient. And that's where it's a calculation or it's a direct measurement when you see free testosterone is low. So how do you fix that? One of the ways you can fix that is give testosterone. Will bring down the sex hormone binding globulin. Some people use boron or
Yeah.
metals to kind of get the testosterone off that carrier protein. Or you can go about it, say, okay, there's high cortisol, there's high estrogen. I've got to work on this estrogen. So you'll find a lot of men are given aromatase inhibitors along with their testosterone.
So what is that? That's an enzyme that takes the testosterone and steals it and makes it estrogen instead of
And
keeping it.
yeah, it makes estrogen. And in fact, that's how we get our estrogen. All of our estrogen comes through testosterone or DHEA.
I mean, even in women too.
Yeah, in women too.
Wow, that's a very interesting factoid. Very
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
Yeah.
So aromatase inhibition, which progesterone can do in part. Here's another lovely little piece of what
Oh,
progesterone can do for you. It's an aromatase inhibitor. It balances that out so your estrogen is not so excessive. And you might have to look at methylation. You might have to look at the gut microbiome. You might have to detox from plastics, insecticides, glyphosate,
yes,
estrogen.
that was my next point is why are we seeing so many young men with low testosterone? Is it because we're checking more, or is there really an issue here with our environment impacting our health? What's your feelings on it?
A lot of problems with our environment and a lot of estrogen to deal with. So what's happening? You know, you're exposed to all these estrogens. You can't really do an estradiol level and get a solid um, piece that this person's too excessive in estrogen. It might not be there. There's lots of estrogens in the human body. Plus, we have all these extra estrogens. So you could be loading up on sex hormone binding globulin with all this estrogen stuff, really knocking down your testosterone activity. And there you are. Insulin and glucose is a big piece in younger men. Have you noticed? Have you noticed that there's all these men shaving their heads, very young men shaving their heads
Hmm.
because they're not growing their hair. So why aren't they growing their hair? This is tied up into insulin and glucose dysregulation. High cortisol, if you're having that, depletes your testosterone and also interferes with thyroid. You need active thyroid in your
Hmm.
little hair follicle cells to make hair with. On top of you have to be eating well enough that you absorb protein and minerals to make that hair grow. You have the raw materials, and you also have to have the digestive juices to be able to absorb it.
So you're tying losing the hair in younger men not only to aggressive testosterone, which is DHT, but it's evolved way beyond that with thyroid and you mentioned can you go through that again? That's very interesting to us, men
Well,
losing
I'll, I'll,
hair.
I'll pick up the DHT.
Yeah.
Dihydrotestosterone is really the active testosterone. It's much stronger than testosterone.
Okay.
And there's an enzyme called 5-alpha reductase that works on testosterone to create this more active DHT. But what happens is we have another hormone that 5-alpha reductase works on, and it's progesterone. And progesterone, if it's not there, you get all that activity pushing the DHT and not having any progesterone to work on. So you put some progesterone in and you get a more balanced situation.
Hmm.
So this is important for men. And guess what? They made a drug called finasteride. And they use finasteride, and it's like an altered progesterone molecule, and they feed it to men For what? Premature balding to help you grow hair.
And
And
if their prostate is if the prostate is gigantic or
right,
swelling.
and for prostate enlargement. And
Oh,
guess what further? There are so many side effects to this drug. There's class action suits against
oh,
men are losing their sexual not only interest but function. That it doesn't work. High
wow.
depression, high rate of suicide for men on this drug. So why are we putting this synthetic dangerous drug into men instead of using progesterone, which has none of those side effects, would work like your body would work if it was working normally. If you didn't exhaust your progesterone in men as well as women, so where would you have exhausted it with all these corticosteroids that you are depleting because of stress and prolonged
Right. The fight or
adrenaline?
flight, the
Yes.
stealing, robbing from Peter to pay Paul, where we steal the body. I mean, why do we do that? I think it's because survival is, when we're in the fight or flight, whether it's real fight or flight, like being chased by a saber-toothed tiger or being late with your mortgage,
Yeah.
or whatever stress you have, then the body, it must think that that's survival. So it steals these life-saving hormones down one pathway, almost like diverting a river. So it's kind of like the people diverting the Colorado. They're always complaining. I have no water here, one state versus the other. Well, they're diverting the river to one state versus the other, California versus, whatever
Exactly.
Arizona.
What a great metaphor.
Yeah, it's like a dam. So stress steals all that. So you're saying that progesterone would actually mitigate that stress in a way.
Yeah, it does.
Wow.
It does in several ways. So progesterone's a key, and it's a key for men's physiology. It's like, oh, men don't make any testosterone. They make some with the testes, but they make a lot. They make as much as women do from their adrenal glands. And you see that in the follicular phase in the menstrual cycle. That progesterone comes from the adrenal glands, and men have the same. And there's a lot of it. The problem is we've been making these charts, and progesterone has been measured in nanograms per deciliter, things like estrogen in picograms, and we make the picograms look big, and we're representing progesterone in nanograms when those lines should be 1,000 times higher for the progesterone. So we have faulty graphs, and we have medical school students coming out of their classes on physiology because they have this powerful depiction in a graph form, but it's in different units, and you're not appreciating that progesterone is such a high thing, and it's very abundant hormone. Not to mention,
Interesting.
not to mention, so we're all hung up for women that, oh, it's the ovaries and the luteal phase. When you release the corpus luteum, it's making all this progesterone. We're all hung up on that, and we forget everything else. So guess what? Progesterone is made all over the body. This is in the last 30 years, we've learned much more about our endocrine system. Our nerve cells make pregnenolone and progesterone in the Schwann cells. The Schwann cells are responsible for the integrity of the myelin sheath, which protects all the nerves. Guess what? There is nothing we can do to measure that. It's produced and used right there. No saliva, urine, anything will measure that progesterone. And guess what else, which is really exciting? If you use progesterone and the nerve cells are depleted, if the myelin sheath is having issues, guess what? Those neurological symptoms disappear.
So basically, there's some possible research looking at progesterone for MS patients or diseases where they have myelin sheath or some
Exactly.
neurological, like how about neuropathy possibly? That's
Yes,
interesting.
yes. For all
Yeah.
neuropathies, I'd make sure you have plenty of progesterone. Here's another
Wow.
here's another situation.
Hmm.
So we have suddenly we have an emergence of mast cell activation disease.
Yes, after the vaccines or after people having COVID, it's a very much a similar associated with that and other
Right.
illnesses.
Well, guess what happens with that? Inside the mast cells, which are the histamine producing cells of your immune system, there's a whole hormone cascade in there too that we can't measure. And if there's more estrogen than there is progesterone to balance it, that's when the histamine gets released. So lo and behold, you use progesterone, you can actually have an antihistamine type reaction because you're balancing this estrogen inside the mast cells. I think this is pretty exciting. However,
I lectured recently on the effect of that excessive estrogen is not good for autoimmunity, but androgens are better. Like a lot of research on lupus and
yeah.
scleroderma and Sjogren's syndrome,
Oh, well,
RA. But what about progesterone in autoimmune disease?
yeah, it would be helpful. In fact, I don't care what label you put on something.
Hmm.
I like to see a big metabolic panel with all the hormone systems being checked. And it's like a 12 tube blood draw, but it gives me the most useful information. It's all coming from the same sample, and now you can see relationships that are meaningful. So this is what I ask my clients to get done for if they want to dig deep into what's going on with them. And there's another little piece here on histamine. Once you have histamine release, progesterone is not going to help you with that. It's the preventative. How do you get rid of histamine? There's a
Well, I know
couple,
there's some things that you can do to denature it
yeah,
quickly.
DAO
Yeah.
enzyme is one. And guess what the other is? Secondarily, methylation. We're back to methylation
Mhm.
for estrogens, for adrenaline, now histamine too. It's
Flavonoids too. I know flavonoids are, and I think that because they help deliver methylate.
probably. And there's
Hmm.
another methylation piece because your microbiome is involved in creating methyl groups and it creates the B vitamins, your
So
flora.
the bacteria that live in the
And you're
organisms living in the intestine.
right, right. So if you have some good balance there, you're making methyl groups all by yourself with your microbiome. Tremendous impact. So let's go
Interesting.
back to sexuality.
Sure.
Just testosterone is really important for function, and for men, it needs to be there. And you've got to control the insulin glucose, the high estrogen, or you're going to get prostate enlargement. Now you're interfering with your circulation to your organs. That's not good. Testosterone's good, but you can't just use that and get the results you want. You've got to look at the whole hormone picture. DHEA is helpful in women for sexual interest, but they haven't shown that it also works for men in this way. One of the things I did look up a long time ago, like where can we get testosterone in nature? And I found bee pollen and pine pollen are very nice for that.
Bee pollen.
Yeah,
Wow, that's interesting. Because I know they feed the queen bee the royal jelly, which is, makes
yeah,
her become a queen bee. So it has to have some, you know, reproductive effects. I mean, it's probably different in us mammals, but it's interesting, that's for sure. And pine pollen, well, that's
yeah,
in a plant, but it actually does have testosterone in it.
yeah.
But then you want to make sure that, like, so when a man takes extra testosterone, you want to make sure that you know ahead of time if their aromatase is too high because they'll steal that to make more estrogen.
Right.
So you might want to do some things like balance insulin, you mentioned, lose some
Mhm.
weight, um, practice meditation, maybe look at some of those minerals that you mentioned, like boron. I've
Yeah.
actually seen magnesium and zinc also seem to have some effects on testosterone. There was a study that martial artists who applied magnesium cream before they did their workouts, their testosterone actually went up after the workout, whereas the control group, it didn't go up. So I thought that was pretty fascinating too, that maybe there's some effect of magnesium and testosterone.
You'll find magnesium is a cofactor, minerals are cofactors, vitamins are coenzymes. Magnesium is a frequent cofactor in the whole steroidal cascade.
And what about zinc? Zinc is
Zinc
well, no, like people have
is,
have associated oysters with love and
yeah,
and
50 oysters a day and you can be Casanova, right?
exactly. I was just gonna say Casanova and oysters. So
That's right.
so there are
And
minerals.
they
You were
say it
saying,
was
sorry.
they said it was the zinc, but zinc also has aromatase inhibition, so you're not making as much estrogen. So it's something you need to be um, paying attention to. Here's another piece. You need zinc to make hydrochloric acid for your stomach to digest properly. So a lot of us are just plain low on the zinc, and then it's got hundreds of activities in our immune system. When we're in the COVID stuff, all these things, ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, even green tea, colchicine, guess what they all have in common? It's their zinc ionophores, meaning they help zinc get
Mm.
into the cell.
Wow, that's interesting. I didn't know that. So I know zinc is very critical mineral for our immune system, but also for the sexual system. There was a study that men who could not father children, when they were given zinc, it raised their testosterone and they were able to father children, but it didn't and raise their testosterone. But for men who had normal zinc already, it didn't seem to
Didn't do
work.
anything. Yeah.
So that to me was pretty fascinating. So zinc is not don't run outside everyone and just start popping zinc. Um, it has to be measured first in patients. I think measurement's really important. So
Okay, here's a measurement you can use for
yeah.
zinc. It's alkaline phosphatase.
So tell me about that, like on your blood tests.
Yeah, on your blood tests, and they put it over with the other liver enzymes. But if it's a Gaussian curve too, with the highest in the middle. So if you're less in the middle, it's good potential that you're low in zinc.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So zinc and man. I've also read that some of the testosterone is made by the testes, but there are some things that are negative for the testicular health that impact actually the cells, the Leydig cells, which are the cells that make involved with making testosterone. So you said the testosterone is made by the Leydig cells in the testes, but it's also made by the adrenals.
Well, the
Which
adrenals,
should we be? Which should we be? Which should we be focusing on, us guys? The adrenals or the
okay,
testicle?
in the adrenals, you're going through DHEA as the precursor.
Right.
Okay, so there's researchers at McGill University have published, and this particularly in women, I think, but it's probably true for men. Inside the cells, we have intracrinology, all dependent on DHEA as a starter material. Another area we can't measure the impact of hormones inside the cell, but we're doing this little factories all over the place as
Hmm.
as an alternative to the testes and the ovaries, all from DHEA, intracrinology. I think this is so fascinating because we learned, you probably learned like I did, that this organ does this hormone.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're finding that hormones are created all over the place in the brain. Your body uses cholesterol in the brain independently. It makes all these hormones there too. So another thing, make sure you're not too low in cholesterol because
Yeah, I think that's the take-home message, you know.
your
Well, we're
brain.
running out of time. We're running out of time, Carol. So I wanted you to promote how if patients are interested or your website's has fantastic information on hormones. This is a show that we're going to have to listen to, put playback many times because we
Thanks.
cover a lot of endocrinology and it's so complex. Um, but tell us a little bit about how people can find out more about your work and things like that, Carol.
You can find me. My website is the wellnessbydesignproject.com. And you can book with me for personal consultations. But please, I am putting all this information. I'll put these radio shows down there as resources on my page too. I want people to learn about this because that's the most important things. People need to start taking charge of their own health and not be giving away all their power to a medical practice that really doesn't produce wellness. But you have to have the basic information to know what's going on with your body and what steps you need to take and where to start going down the rabbit holes just for you. Also have by the same name, I have a YouTube channel with quite a few lectures on there. So I want people to take advantage. I'm giving this out freely. We
Yeah, we
don't
appreciate it.
we don't have to suffer. And there are tools. We talked about many today, and I'm sure a lot of listeners have never heard such things. And in medical practices, who do you go to? You go to gynecologist, you go to endocrinologist, you go to internist, and there's nobody with the big picture that I'm describing where insulin glucose, your adrenal hormones, and your thyroid hormones and your sex hormones. You've got to know about everything before you can create a good plan for yourself to return or reach a good place in your health, and your aging will be that much better because you have tools that are available now for the first time in the whole of human history, as far as I know, except for, I guess, when people were eating organs, that would help. Just so we have these tools and we just need to know about them, know what they're supposed to be doing for us, identify the problems. So I've got lots of information for everybody to look at.
Thank you, Carol, very much. So again, we've been interviewing Carol Peterson, an accomplished compounding pharmacist with decades of experience helping patients improve their quality of life. And we're so happy that she talked about this. Again, her website is the Wellness by Design Project.com. All one word, no punctuation. The Wellness by Design Project. Carol, thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Z.
And that does it for another edition of the Natural House Call with Dr. Z. You can always reach me at my email. That's drznaturally, drznaturally at gmail.com. Make it a great day and stay healthy, folks. Bye bye.